Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Maybe some of you viewed our week in review video that we put up earlier this morning. I want to give an update on what has happened today here in Washington and really give an update of just the democratic process that has played out this week. So I'm going to cover a couple of different continuing resolutions, what they are, some failed, some passed, individual appropriations bills, some failed, some passed, and what has to take place, and just that democratic process that played out. So let's start earlier in the week. Earlier in the week, we knew that there was a government shutdown pending at the end of September. We've known this was coming. In order to avoid that, if you want the government to be funded, there's a myriad of ways that you could do it. We have made a promise to do 12 individual appropriations bills. That has not happened in a very long time. And to be frank, it's a difficult process to do it, right? Not on all of those bills do even all of the Republicans want to support Republican-led bills. And, a lot of Democrats don't want to support Republican-led bills. So let me just start with that. Let me start with the 12 individual appropriations bills and say that in this week there were five bills that we brought up of appropriations bills out of the 12. 4 of them passed, 1 of them failed. So the 5 that we brought up this week, we brought up SFOPs, which is State and Foreign Operations. That's State Department. It was a massive amount of cuts that went to State Department. And I want to say that it was the first time that a Republican Congress had passed State and Foreign Ops by itself without tying it to anything else. Republican or Democrat-led Congress had passed that by itself. So that was a really big deal. Passed defense appropriations, which had a host of things from dropping the salary down to people like Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, that has basically had nobody answer for what happened with the abandonment and the withdrawal of Afghanistan, leaving all that equipment behind, and a host of other terrible decisions. That's just one example of something went through that bill, but that passed. Department of Defense appropriations. Homeland Security appropriations passed. Again, with things, a number of great things that I supported, doing things to secure the southern border, taking the pay of people like Alejandro Mayorkas, who's been abysmal, has not done his job at all, literally allowed, not just allowed, but facilitated millions of people illegally coming across our border, hasn't worked to stop that. And so this appropriation, led by Republicans, reformed the Department of Homeland Security, just like the one for State Department reformed State Department, the one for Defense reformed the Department of Defense, and also passed the one for the Department of Veterans Affairs, which had a great number of reforms for the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was good. The one that didn't pass this week of those that went through was the Department of Agriculture appropriations, and some people had some problems with that. On none of these were there ever any Democrat support on it. Democrats didn't try to support getting 12 appropriations bills across the line, or even 1 across the line, but the agriculture one was the one that didn't have enough Republican support to get over the line. Here's the other ones that we have to do, and I'm going to take a pause in the middle here to say this is what happened just now. And the reason I'm pausing in the middle to say that is because what I'm going to talk about with the rest of the appropriations is what happens after what just happened just now. So what happened just now was there's a passing vote of a continuing resolution. The continuing resolution is basically Congress resolves to continue the appropriations that were happening previously and resolves to continue them for whatever amount of days. This continuing resolution that passed was a CR for 45 days. So I want to say it takes us up to November 17, and it continues the appropriations that were taking place previously for all of those agencies. Now, I voted for a continuing resolution previous to this one. I did not vote for this one that just passed. The one that I voted for previously was a cut of about 8 to 10% of all of the spending that goes on in this country. It added a number of other provisions related to border security, such as finishing the border wall, different let's say reforms to the asylum process, ending the catch and release, which is something that the Biden administration has been doing with those millions of illegal immigrants crossing the border, is taking them, saying, okay, we took down your name, and then basically releasing them into the community. It's actually far more provocative than that. The administration actually created an app to allow people to say, hey, I'm about to cross your border illegally. Here's maybe my name or my fake name. And so I'm just checking in with you that I'm coming across this place that is not a border of entry and letting you know. And so basically they don't even have to really check in, many of these people. They're checking in via app that they're coming into America legally and then being released off to wherever. That's so that they can more easily facilitate people coming through illegally. That's the Biden administration and why this is happening. So I voted for a continuing resolution that did those things. Fact of the matter is, that's the democratic process. It didn't get enough votes to pass. It had no Democrat support, and it had about 20 Republicans that didn't support that. And so ultimately, what did get the support? There was a bill that passed just a few minutes ago that was a 45-day continuation of current appropriations. No cuts. It did have some other things. It continued the Federal Aviation Administration. It was an extension for that, an extension for National Flood Insurance Program, and it did have disaster relief funding for the hurricane that happened just recently, and also what happened in Maui with the wildfire, the fire in Maui. So those were some of the things of that. Now, that passed. The one that I voted for didn't pass. Democratic process. Here's what happens going forward. I talked about those other appropriations bills that passed and one that failed: SFOPS, Defense, Homeland, Department of Veterans Affairs, and Agriculture. Here's the ones that we have to do moving forward that will get done in this next 45-day window. It'll probably get done really in about a less than a 30-day window. And then hopefully the Senate will choose to take those up, although, we can cross our fingers. The Senate to this date has actually done 0 appropriations bills. Let me say that again. We've passed 4 out of 5 that we tried to pass out. Senate has passed 0. They haven't even tried to pass any of those appropriations bills. So if there were a shutdown, it would really, you could say it should be the Senate's fault, but there's no point in talking about that right in this moment. Here's the other appropriations that need to pass to get to 12 passing appropriations bills. Have to get agriculture across the finish line. Then there's energy and water appropriations. That's energy and water funds things like South Florida ecosystem restoration, things like that, a number of other things. Then there's what's known as the ledge branch or legislative branch appropriations. That's the people that work in the Capitol here, that work on the staff of the Foreign Affairs Committee or work on the staff of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the people that are the parliamentarians on the floor of the House of Representatives, the people that work to keep the building clean and maintained and the lights on and things like that, legislative branch. So those appropriations have to be done. Then there's Department of Interior appropriations. That's the national parks. Whether you want to go to Yellowstone or whether you want to go to the Lincoln Memorial or the Vietnam Memorial Wall, the national parks that exist out there. Then there's FSGC. That's financial services, which are agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, things like that. So financial services appropriations. THUD, which is Transportation, Housing, Urban Development. I sit on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. What has to be done there is those things related to transportation that deal with maritime, with rail, with over the road, with aviation, transportation related appropriations. Then there's CJS. I have my doubts that CJS gets over the finish line as all. That is Commerce and Justice. So Justice, you're talking about the FBI, what's happened there recently, and I think that is probably the most difficult lift to get over the finish line is anything related to what's gone on with the weaponization of government. We'll see what reforms come out of that bill. Remember, these are Republican-led bills. So the Republican-led bills have awesome reforms that go through them to tear the teeth out of the bat poop crazy stuff that this administration is doing with these agencies, like letting people in come in illegally, like what they've done to weaponize the government against parents at school boards or people online or you name it, a host of other things. But I don't know if they can get to defanging the Department of Justice and what they've done in Merrick Garland enough to actually get that over the finish line. That's my prediction up front. And then the last one that we have to do is labor and HHS. So that's Department of Labor and I have my doubts about that one as well, whether that one gets over the finish line. But the House of Representatives will work to get all 12 of those. Probably, as I said, maybe 10 of those actually get to the Senate to fund the government in the right way and in the first time in decades passing individual appropriations bills. So Very big deal. Now, I want to talk about one other thing. As long as the Senate passes what the House passed by midnight tonight. So like I said, there was a continuing resolution that just passed the House floor a few minutes ago. I didn't vote for it. I voted for a different one. The one that I voted for didn't get the most amount of votes. It didn't pass. This one did go there. If the Senate passes that, then there will not be a government shutdown. Now, if the Senate has that go over there and they say, we're not taking this up, the Senate can go over there and say, listen, we have not passed any appropriations bills, not one, and we have not passed our own continuing resolution, and we're not going to take up your continuing resolution, and we're just going to let the government shut down. They could do that. That's something that could take place. But if they do choose to take it up and it passes by midnight tonight, then the government does not shut down. So that's been a little bit about the democratic process that has played out throughout the week, really before this week, but certainly throughout this week. What happened just a few minutes ago, what's going to happen within all likelihood this next 45-day window of working under what's known as a continuing resolution. I'd say one other quick thing about this. I thought that the continuing resolution that was put forward earlier in the week, I thought it was a very good piece of legislation with awesome conservative wins. Like I said, asylum reform was in there. It was an 8 to 10% cut of all of the spending of the U.S. government, which I thought was something that was very important. It literally demanded that they finish the border wall. Ended, like I said, the catch and release program. There's some really big things that were in there, and it was Republicans that didn't get on it to pass it. With enough Republican support by itself, it could have been sent over the Senate, and that be the one that the Senate is dealing with. But I think it's really a situation of, for some, and I'm not saying that they weren't principled. They had their principles for their beliefs and why they made their votes. I believe that about those colleagues, but I think in the end, it became a situation of letting perfect be the enemy of something great. Could there have been a lot of other things that I would have pushed in there? Yeah, I would have been happy to see 15% cuts instead of 10% cuts. Or I would have been happy to see, in there that Merrick Garland is fired. That's not something exactly that you could have put in there, or Secretary Mayorkas that you could have put in there. It was done in other places, but those weren't in there. But there were other places that those things were, and there were great things in there. And in the end, we don't have those things going forward, and like I said, I think it's in my opinion because for a few people, great became or perfect became the enemy of great, and in that, we'll see what happens with moving these 10 to 12 appropriations bills, what the Senate takes up on it. As always, I'll say this. It is an honor to represent you. Thank you for allowing me to do so. We will be back in session beginning early Monday morning and taking more votes then, working on these appropriations, trying to get them over to the Senate.